الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. So as far as the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are concerned, we've spoken about His qudra, we've spoken about His irada, we've spoken about that level of qudra and irada that He has. We've spoken about His ilm, and we've said that His ilm is connected and related to everything. And now we're going to speak about those things that continue to speak about those things that God's knowledge is related to. So we know that ilmullah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited, and it goes beyond time and space. It is ilm of the past, ilm of the present, ilm of the future, ilm of things that have happened, ilm of things that have not yet to happen. And most importantly, that His ilm, as we have explained, is essential to Him, that it is a part of Him, embodied within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it's different to ilm of a ma'soom. Ilm of a ma'soom is similar to ilm Allah, with the fundamental difference that this is endowed by God, this is essential within God. So God's ilm is essential within Him, the ma'soom's ilm is given by God. So there's no kind of contradiction or anything of that sort when, for example, Imam Ali says, "Ask me before you lose me, because I know this and I know that." Or if the ma'soom was to say, "We have been given ilmul manaya wal balaya, we know of all knowledge, ilm ma kana wa ma yakunu wa ma huwa ka'in," and all these things. And we say, "Oh, well, isn't that God's knowledge?" Well, God's knowledge is unlimited. The ma'soom's knowledge is limited, given to the ma'soom by God.
So does the ma'soom have, because the God is unlimited, or?
It's limited within what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. All right, start reading please, Nisar. And God and His knowledge is connected.
He said His knowledge is connected to every known thing, ma'loom.
Every ma'loom, yani everything that is known.
Because of the equality of the relationship of all known things to Him.
So everything that is in existence is of equal relation as far as God's knowledge is concerned. Carry on.
For He is living, hay, and it is proper that every living thing one should know every known thing.
Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hay, and whatever, anything that is hay should know anything that is known.
Hence, that is necessary for Him because of the impossibility of His being in need of another.
This means that it is wajib for God to know everything. It is necessary for God to know everything, because it would be impossible for God, who is the needless, to need knowledge. Makes absolutely no sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is al-Ghani al-Mutlaq, He is absolutely needless. For us to say, well, there are some pieces of information that God doesn't know and He would need to know. No, that doesn't make sense. That's contradictory, isn't it? If we say that God is all powerful, that means He is needless. If we say that God is needless, then of course that means that God is not going to need any knowledge and that he has knowledge within him. Carry on.
I say the Most High Creator knows everything that can be properly known, whether necessary or possible prior originated.
Okay. Anything that needs to be known, whether that be necessary or contingent or eternal or ancient or created. And this is, of course, the fundamental belief that theologians have. The philosophers, al-Hukama, they have another opinion. The philosophers, they have another opinion.
This is contrary to the philosophers in that they have denied that he has knowledge of parts of the
Particulars.
as parts.
Okay. Now, what does this mean? Some philosophers say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have ilm bil juz'iyat, does not have ilm in the particulars of something, right? He only has ilm al-kulli, he only has universal knowledge. Reason being is because with particulars, they are going to change. If they change, God's knowledge will change. And therefore, to avoid this, philosophers say that God's knowledge can never change. So God doesn't know the particulars, God only knows the universals. And that means that God's knowledge will never change. So to avoid attributing something false to God, which is that God's knowledge changes, philosophers came up with this idea and said that God doesn't know the particulars, and by doing so, we're not attributing God's knowledge going under any kind of change. Theologians say, no, that's not the case, that's never the case. God's knowledge in universals, God's knowledge in particulars, it's all of the same level, doesn't matter. Even with the changing of things, that is not going to affect God's knowledge because God already knew that these particulars were going to go through changes, because God's knowledge is not only limited to the immediate present, but also to the future, also to the past. And so it's not going to affect God if something, for example, for whatever reason, does change. Right? Carry on.
He knows them as a whole, not as parts, because changing them will
necessitate change in the knowledge which resides in God's essence, which of course for theologians that doesn't make sense. So the theologians reply to this, that which changes, something that changes, is the relative connection and not the essential knowledge that God has. That which changes is the relative connection and not the essential knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. Could carry on.
And the proof of our position is that it is proper for him to know every known thing. Therefore, this knowledge is necessary for him.
Yes, because God can know, if God can know anything that is known, therefore that knowledge becomes necessary for him.
And it is proper for him to know every known thing because he is living, and everyone that lives can properly know.
So God is alive, and and he who is alive can know. Because the dead thing, as it says in the footnote, can't know. So knowledge is a, as it says in the footnote, knowledge is a property of hayat, yani it's a part of being alive.
And the relationship of this propriety for him to know all things, to all that is apart from him is an equal relationship. That is, it is equally proper that he knows all things.
Yes. Equally proper, in equal balance, that God knows all these things.
Hence, the relation of all known things to him is also
To God is equal, whether it's universal or whether it's particular.
And the proof that whenever a thing is proper for the Most High, it is also necessary for him is this: his qualities belong to his essence.
Yes. So what does that mean? It means that they're not additional. The sifat of God are not things that are idafi. They're not things that are additional. They're essential, inherent within God. Carry on.
And when a quality which belongs to the essence is proper, it is also necessary. Otherwise, he would have need of something else, in that his essence was qualified by
Something other than God, which of course cannot be applied to God, because whatever God has is from within himself.
Then the Most High Creator, as regards his knowledge, would be in need of something else.
Something else, and that is impossible, because God is al-Ghani al-Mutlaq. He is in no need of someone or something to come and teach him or tell him about something. And therefore God's knowledge is essential within him. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.